to be able to see somebody gets a couch this weekend or a bed that they didn't have, and I'm able to see that with my own eyes, and that's very gratifying and satisfying.
Welcome to the Legacy Project. My name is Jim Copple, president of the Servant Forge Foundation. We're an organization committed to leadership development with a specific focus on service. This podcast and its related activities are about sharing the legacy we have inherited and discussing the legacy we still want to create. Legacy is more than cars, houses, boats, and material possessions that we want to leave to the next generation. Rather, legacy is about core values and beliefs that we inherited from a previous generation. They are the values that shaped us and defined us. Legacy is also about the values we develop or create that can be passed on or shared with the next generation. We will interview people from various backgrounds and walks of life. Some are famous, some, well, maybe not so famous, and others are simply our neighbors, our friends, people who live ordinary lives doing extraordinary things. Become part of this project by being intentional about legacy, more than just memories, but principles that have guided our lives and shaped our decisions. What is the legacy you choose to create? That's what we want to discover. Today we're interviewing Mike Mackey, who is the Director of Court Services for the state of Virginia, or the Commonwealth of Virginia, here in the city of Alexandria. I've known Mike for a number of years. Worked with him on a gang task force here in the city of Alexandria. Smart guy from Boston, right? Or from
Boston, Massachusetts.
From Boston, Massachusetts. Tell me about your family. What's how many brothers, sisters, or?
I'm the youngest of five.
Yeah.
I have two brothers, two sisters, and my mother and father, all of them live in Massachusetts now. My parents have now passed.
Uh-huh.
And I have 6 nephews and 2 nieces.
How long have you been in this job?
4 years.
4
as
years.
the director.
But you've worked for court services longer than that, or for the city, or?
Yeah, I've worked in Alexandria actually for 26 years. I was in shelter care for 5 years. Then I was a probation officer for several years, and then gang prevention coordinator for 10 years, and now the director for 4.
Mm-hmm. What took you into that kind of career? What made you go that path?
An experience, I think that really tipped the hat was in college. I started as a business major.
Where'd you go to school?
I started at North Adams State University College in Mass, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I figured business. Well, okay, try that. I was accounting, and it's a really good thing I didn't become an accountant because of my skill set is not in that area. I took a course my sophomore year in sociology. In fact, it was actually called deviant behavior, and so I studied that, and I just felt it was really interesting. And then I made a good connection with the professor of the class, and started thinking about, well, maybe I could do business, but with sociology or social work in the background or that kind of thing. And then that transpired into some volunteer work that I did with intellectually disabled. And I really liked that human connection. And I decided North Adams was not the place for me. I wanted to go to University of Massachusetts. But I still applied for the business school, didn't get in. I was my second semester junior year without a major. So I was trying to figure out what to do. A godmother ran a psychiatric facility back home. Had some conversations with her. Thought that sounded interesting to tie in with the whole behavior issues, and ended up majoring in psychology. And during that time, I did an internship in the hospital in the psychiatric unit, and really liked it. Felt it was a good spot for me, and probably the biggest push was what would I do after college. I really didn't know. I'd maybe stay in Western Massachusetts and work in the hospital, and I was raising money to participate in a road race that benefited Covenant House. And I went up to this person, and I said, would you donate $5 for me to do this race? And she welled up, she teared up, and she said, do you know what this is all about? And I said, not really. I just wanted to run the race.
Yeah.
And she said, here, I'm going to give you a book. And she gave me a book that was written by the founder of Covenant House. And I decided right then I was gonna go work for them. And so I did that after college for a year, and that led into my working with kids.
It's an interesting journey, and that kind of an interesting experience. What years were those?
I graduated college in 1990, worked for Covenant House into 1992.
Yeah. When did you move to Virginia?
That same year when I finished. Yep.
So you really kind of started that career, that part of your career
It
here
did.
in Virginia. So you have 5 siblings, did you say, or 4 siblings?
4 siblings.
4 siblings. Yeah. So who are some of the influences in your life? I mean, that have helped shape your thinking, your values, who you are, what you're about. What are some of the influences?
Well, I would start with my mother and father, of course. I think I was blessed with parents who, while obviously no one's perfect, had great values, provided for a good place, a good foundation. They are, the way I describe my parents is that they're just really good, kind people, very hardworking, family oriented, wanted to make an impression on other people in a positive way, be supportive, that kind of thing. They grew up in the Depression. They talked fondly about their upbringing. They talked fondly about their relatives, their older relatives too. And I think they're just really, really nice people, very kind. And I think they to start with, my siblings as well, in different ways. An aunt who was kind of the age of a grandmother, but she helped raise us, and she was very very influential to me. Some coaches, some teachers, I would say.
So when you look at your parents, what is the legacy that you think you've taken from them or inherited from them that they've given you?
That we should try to be kind to the world. No one's perfect. We all have bad days, but that try to do for others where you can. Laugh when you can. Try to meet people where they are when you can. Both of my parents, in different ways, had an ability to do that somehow. I think it's fair to say that whether they saw somebody at the supermarket or church or in their home, they had an ability to bring people in to say this is a safe place for you to be. So I try to do that myself, and I think that comes from them. And I think another piece of that too is their work ethic. My father was a Marine, career Marine. Very proud of that, proud of him. And then he came home in the 70s from Vietnam, and he had 5 kids to manage, and he went to work every day as a custodian, and my mother worked in a hospital as a housekeeper. It was going to work every day, coming home, taking care of the family, and just, you were there, you worked, that's what you did, and you provided. So I kind of came away. I think those couple things.
Yeah. Those kinds of legacies and those kinds of values that you inherited, how's that influenced your line of work?
I think with especially the trying to be to a person, particularly if they're having trouble, trying to be a safe space for somebody, try to be kind to other people, give somebody a chance to maybe have what I had that my parents gave to me, to show up to work every day and work really, really as hard as I can, like they did.
Are there things in your life, I mean, they can be material things, they could be objects, or just encounters that often remind you of your legacy from your family or your coaches or your teachers that inspire or encourage you? Do you have things like that in your life?
First thing that comes to mind is my truck.
Mm-hmm.
My dream car is an old beat up truck,
Really?
and I own one.
That's great.
It's and I bought it about 5 or 6 years ago, and I think the reason I choose that symbol is because it's not pretty, it's not flashy or anything like that. It's reliable. It shows up to work every day. I use it to do things. I'm blessed, fortunate enough to work with a nonprofit in the city to help people to get them furniture that don't have furniture. So I use it for that. I kind of bang around in it. It's obvious, but it's not in your face because you can drive down the street and it's noticed, but it's also it's kind
It fits in.
It fits in. But I think that because it's kind of old reliable, and I joke about it with my neighbors, the Sanford Son theme song coming in, but to use something like that to be a presence in the community and to do something good with it, that's I guess what I come with.
Yeah. Any other things that you? If for example, your parents are deceased, correct? And so, when they were alive, were there things in their house that you maybe took from the house once they passed that remind you of where you came from?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of other things actually. I have my dad's coffee cups. I have my mom the bells that my mom used in her later age. I have religious artifacts from them. They were Irish descent. I have some of their Irish stuff. That they had things like that.
Have you been to Ireland?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went with them.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, 15 years ago.
Yeah. What did that mean to you?
Oh, that was a trip of a lifetime. It was amazing. Just to drive around with them and my mom in the passenger seat, my dad in the back seat with the map, and we saw Ireland. It was great for 3 weeks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
There's one thing that I have that was part of my dad's stuff that was a judge gave him, and it was the story of the footprints, and it's a book, but it's a solid piece, and it has the story of footprints, and that was very special to both of my parents, and that whole faith driven behind what we're doing, and it's not going to necessarily be an easy road for you, but keep your faith because God's with you too.
Are they Irish Catholic?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mike, in terms of your journey, and when you stop and think of your life, what is it you want to leave behind? What is it that, when people think of Mike Mackey, what do you want people to say about that and about who you are?
I want people to say that I was a kind, decent person, that I was respectful to everybody, whether you were the CEO in the boardroom or the man on the street asking for $1, that I gave more than I took, that I worked really, really hard, that I cared about other people, that I made them laugh.
Yeah. You have nieces, nephews?
I do.
Yeah. So, what do you want them to think?
And now I'm thinking about my interactions with them. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I first start with humor because they're hilarious, and I try to be funny with them, and whether or not they think I'm funny or not, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think in a similar way, I think I want them to think, oh yeah, Uncle Mike, he was a good guy, you know, he treated me nicely, he listened to me. He helped me during this time, or you know, he was nice. Oh yeah, I heard he used to do a couple things for the neighborhood or whatever. I like that. I kind of want to do what he did or something like that.
Yeah. Since I've known you, I've always seen you sort of on dual tracks. One, you work for a court system, and then you are also an amazing volunteer in this city and in this community. Do you see what you do in those two spaces as different, or do you see them in terms of who you are as a person somehow connected?
I think the difference, of course, as you would agree, is the application of it. But I think the theme for me is along the same lines in terms of how can I be of help or service. And the court work, much to my surprise, actually, even in this position, I have found can have as much impact on that takeaway of helping, dealing with somebody who is a paid professional, who may be going through a hard time, and maybe they came into my office and they vented for a while, or they dealt with an issue and we kind of got some things resolved, or that kind of piece of it, the administrative piece. And whereas it's not as much of a practical takeaway, I see that as my work here. I've said to our team here that I want them to see me as a support to help them to do their job in a better way, and to make it easier. That's kind of my philosophy in terms of leading, is to try to be that support. And I think with the volunteer piece of it is to be able to see somebody gets a couch this weekend or a bed that they didn't have, and I'm able to see that with my own eyes, and that's very gratifying and satisfying, and to know that, but that they kind of do relate at their, I guess, origin level.
Does your volunteerism and the kinds of projects you're working with inform what you do in your work?
I think because of my role now, and the fact that I don't see clients often, or as much, I should say, it reminds me of really what we're all doing on a daily basis. That the statistical analysis, or the budget submission, or the hiring process, all affects a person that may walk in here sometimes on the worst day of their life, and that it all is meaningful, and that I should treat it as such, and not blow it off as something that's just some duty that I have to do. That it's all important.
So, and this is a 50,000-foot question, but are things getting better in terms of the folks, the clients, the humans that you work with? I mean, in a culture that seems polarized, a lot of violence, crime, etc. Do you think things are getting better or worse?
I think I'll start by answering it this way. I don't know if it's getting better. I think we, as a service or a response system, and I'm saying that from all facets, from community to my work to, I think we're getting better in response to the issues, some of which are very negative in our community. We all know, of course, as you mentioned, the violence that happens, the abuse that happens, the other crimes, the gang membership, the poverty that is in our community. But I think that whether you're a government worker who now has better tools or training to respond to that, or your volunteer who is now joining because there's better recruitment processes or whatever. I think that's going to help. Overall, crime is down. Crime has been down overall. As you know, violence is still happening all the time.
Let me follow up by asking,
Yeah.
you're now in a management supervisory role, and most of your contact are with your staff.
Yeah.
The values your team brings to the work, have you seen those values change, or has it been fairly consistent? Flying back to D.C. in the last couple of days, I actually was had the opportunity of sitting next to Herm Edwards, who used to be the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Jets. And he's an inspirational speaker. Wow. And we had this great conversation. And he's now the head coach at Arizona State University. He says, now I'm working with 18-year-olds. So he went off into this riff, if you will, about millennials and their expectations, even as athletes. And so changing values in a culture, have you seen that in terms of the people that you work with? People are doing this kind of job?
What I've seen is people still want the connection with other people and want to have the face-to-face or to know that they impacted a person. And the tools may change and the files may change, and I think there's always been and there always will be those challenges around the administrative process of any position. But the feeling I get is that people still hold great value in saying that I helped that kid, or that parent's doing better now because of my work. I do hear that a lot. No place is perfect, and we'll have conversations about office culture and what are our artifacts. When somebody walks in here, one of our officers one day said, if there were 2 court service units in Alexandria, what would make someone come here rather than the other one? And I thought it was perfect. It was about customer service, and it was about being trauma informed and just acknowledging where people are. We all struggle with those kind of administrative or paperwork or whatever, but at the bottom line, I've heard many times people even will tear up and say, this person did this, or if something bad happened with a kid, you can tell when people are really impacted by the people.
So you still think that in the workspace that you're involved in, that human connection, empathy, understanding, compassion, there's still values that operate in the workplace?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So you're optimistic about that?
I am optimistic, yeah. I think there are, in fairness and in all candor, I think there are human challenges to that that I face, that we all face, whether it's traffic, family issues, whatever's going on in society now, concerns that people have, struggles, feeling overwhelmed. There's a lot of people feel overwhelmed a lot. I think that's, and maybe that's always been the case, always will be. But I think in the heart of it, I am optimistic that people want that connection with other people.
How important, from your perspective, now in the role that you're in, is it that you as a leader transmit those values and that those who work for you see those values?
Mandatory. Yeah. Mandatory. I know I don't do it all the time, and I need to. I need to remind myself that I need to be a presence for people. If I say I want to support you to do your job so that you can have the skills and tools and whatever, and then I you come to my door and I just blow you off, or I don't say hello in the morning, or I don't check in with you, what am I really doing?
A couple more questions. We're talking to Mike Mackey in Alexandria, Virginia. He's the Director of Port Services for the Commonwealth of Virginia here in Alexandria, and he's a good friend and colleague. I have one really critical question, Mike. I'm in your office, and I know you're from Boston, and you have a Boston Red Sox banner. You have a Boston Celtics banner. What's with the Pittsburgh Steelers banner?
Well, Jim, if you know anything about me, you know I have great taste in sports.
That's true. I thought you did.
It all goes back to the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And my dear siblings and parents and family, back in the 70s, and I basically was watching football, and I couldn't find a Patriots fan.
That's true.
They're the Cowboys, the Raiders, whatever. So I picked the Steelers, and for some reason in the 90s, all of my family become Patriots.
Yeah. Fair weather fans. Yes, I know. I have a legacy football jacket from the Patriots, and it's the old Boston Patriots kind of jacket. Well, you may be familiar with this this movie, but I was struck by a question in the movie Leap Year, which is based in Ireland, with Amy Adams. A question that's asked in the movie, it's about relationships, really, is that she's asked, if your house caught on fire, what one thing would you grab when you left?
My girlfriend, my puppy.
Okay, girlfriend and your puppy. What about thing?
Two, sorry.
Yeah.
My parents' pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I have these two beautiful pictures of them. They're both about 22 years old, separate, and they're just lovely. I just grab them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a black box, actually. It was from my father, who was in the Second World War as well. And it was kind of a medical kit. He gave it to me when I was a child, and I've kept that black box. But I have put things in that black box that have been reminders of places I've been, things I've done, people I've met. Do you pay attention to those kind of things?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I have a number of those types of boxes.
Uh-huh.
I have a lot of letters that I've gotten from people or objects from different phases of life, be it high school, college, early adulthood. I have one section in my house that's a bookcase that has, I don't know, maybe I would say probably a good 15, 20 objects that belong to my parents that referenced earlier and some pictures.
Did you know your grandparents?
I knew two of the four. Yeah.
Two of the four. Did you see in your parents' legacy that was passed on to them from your grandparents? Or did you pick up anything from your grandparents that have influenced you?
They were quite a bit older by the time I knew, because I'm the youngest. But I think that sense of family was certainly passed on by them. I think I mentioned too, I had an aunt who was really kind of like a third grandmother. I guess I would say probably the biggest thing is sense of family and taking care of other people was big for all of them.
If you were to choose a symbol, and this is the last question, I think, if you were to choose a symbol in your life that summarized who you are and or who you want to be, what would that be?
I haven't seen the best depiction, I guess, of it, but I would. This is what I have in my head, and I think it captures my faith, my desire to be present to others and family and friends and that kind of thing. Is a picture of Lazarus and being I forget if it's the arms of God or just to reach out, kind of like arms extending to the world. That's what I would want my symbol to be.
Yeah, it's a good one. Thank you, Mike. We've been talking to Mike Mackey, who's the Director of Court Services for the Commonwealth of Virginia here in Alexandria, a good friend, somebody I've always respected in this line of work and whose values I can connect with in many ways. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Jim.
To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. We want to hear from you. We want to get your ideas and your opinions. I have a new book that corresponds with the Legacy Project titled The Seeker, Bring Me the Horizon. You can find a copy of it on Amazon or your preferred book distributor. The book corresponds closely with these podcasts. The podcast episode was produced by Matt Erickson and edited by Carissa Erickson. The music is by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode of our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build a future.